The fluorescent lights of the maternity hospital hummed softly, casting a pale glow over the corridor where joy and exhaustion usually walked hand in hand. Newborn cries echoed faintly behind closed doors, mingling with the smell of antiseptic and flowers brought by happy relatives. But near the nurse's station, tension cut through the air like a blade. The young woman stood there clutching a thin hospital blanket around her shoulders, her face still pale from childbirth, eyes dark with disbelief. In front of her loomed her mother-in-law, rigid, lips pressed into a hard line, eyes cold and calculating. There was no congratulations, no tears of happiness, only accusation. "I told you from the beginning," the older woman hissed, her voice sharp enough to turn heads. "This child is not what our family needs. Pack your things. You're not welcome anymore." The words fell like stones. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene. The new mother swayed slightly, one hand instinctively moving to her stomach as if to protect what had already been born. She had imagined many things after giving birth, her husband's smile, her mother's warm embrace, but this public humiliation was not one of them. The mother-in-law's anger seemed rehearsed, as though she had been waiting for this moment. She blamed the young woman for everything, for giving birth too early, for not producing the right circumstances, for embarrassing the family. Abandoned, she spat, as if the word itself were a verdict. "You should have known better. You're rushing to the wrong station in life." Each sentence landed harder than the last. The young woman felt the walls closing in, her strength draining away with every breath. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor, calm, deliberate, unmistakable. Conversations died mid-sentence. The mother-in-law turned, ready to unleash more fury, but the words froze in her throat. A man approached with quiet authority, his presence immediately shifting the balance of power in the room. He was dressed simply, but his posture spoke of confidence and resolve. This was not someone who could be intimidated or dismissed. For a long moment, silence reigned. "Enough," he said quietly, yet the word carried more weight than all the shouting before it. He stepped between the two women, positioning himself protectively in front of the young mother. The mother-in-law's face drained of color. She recognized him instantly, a family elder whose opinion mattered, whose voice carried consequences. Her carefully constructed outrage crumbled, replaced by shock. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, suddenly unsure. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke of respect, of family responsibility, of the cruelty of attacking a woman who had just brought a child into the world. Each sentence was measured, controlled, devastating in its clarity. Nurses listened openly now, no longer pretending not to hear. The mother-in-law's shoulders sagged. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The corridor that had been filled with venom moments earlier now held only her stunned silence. The young mother felt tears spill over, not of fear this time, but of relief. Someone had finally stood up for her. Someone had seen her not as a problem, but as a person. As the man gently guided her back toward her room, the mother-in-law remained frozen in place, speechless, stripped of the power she had so confidently wielded. That same sense of raw confrontation and sudden reversal played out thousands of miles away under very different lights. On the bright, polished set of Good Morning America, millions of viewers tuned in expecting a routine celebrity interview. Sylvester Stallone, a Hollywood legend known for his tough guy roles and gravelly voice, sat opposite Michael Strahan, the former NFL star turned television host. At first, the exchange was friendly enough. Talk of movies, legacy, and career milestones. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. It started with a question that landed wrong. Strahan, smiling but persistent, pushed Stallone on past controversies and creative control, suggesting, perhaps unintentionally, that Stallone's success was tied more to luck than vision. For a split second, Stallone's expression tightened. The smile faded. Viewers who knew him well could see it, the familiar fire being stoked. "I've fought for every inch of my career," Stallone shot back, his voice firm. The studio grew quieter. Strahan attempted to steer the conversation back, but the moment had already shifted. Stallone leaned forward, his words gaining intensity. He spoke about being underestimated, about being told no more times than he could count, about refusing to be pushed into a corner, whether by studio executives or by polite television hosts. The clash was electric. Strahan, clearly surprised by the force of Stallone's response, tried to interject, but Stallone wasn't finished. He wasn't shouting, but his frustration was unmistakable. "People think they can define you," he said, gesturing sharply. "They think they know your story better than you do." The words echoed beyond the studio, resonating with anyone who had ever felt dismissed or misjudged. For a brief, uncomfortable moment, it seemed as though Stallone might stand up and walk off. Cameras caught Strahan adjusting in his seat, searching for the right response. Producers likely held their breath. Then, just as suddenly as it had flared, the tension eased. Stallone sat back, exhaled, and the conversation limped forward, forever changed. In both places, the quiet hospital corridor and the glossy TV studio, the same truth emerged. Words have power. So does presence. Whether it's a vulnerable new mother being attacked at her weakest moment or a seasoned actor bristling at a perceived slight, the eruption comes from the same place, a refusal to be erased or diminished. The mother-in-law's silence and Stallone's outburst were opposite reactions, yet they told the same story. When confronted with unexpected resistance, those who rely on control often falter. And when someone finally speaks up, calmly or explosively, the balance shifts. In the end, dignity has a way of demanding the space it deserves, whether whispered in a hospital hallway or broadcast live to millions. The maternity ward was supposed to be a place of beginnings, not endings. Pale morning light filtered through the tall windows, touching the rows of doors behind which new lives had just entered the world. Somewhere down the hall a baby cried, sharp and insistent, while a nurse murmured soothing words. Yet near the entrance, where families usually gathered with balloons and flowers, a different scene was unfolding, one heavy with bitterness and unresolved grudges. The young woman stood unsteadily, still weak after labor, her hospital bracelet dangling from her wrist. She had barely had time to hold her newborn before being confronted. Her mother-in-law's voice cut through the air, loud and uncompromising, carrying years of resentment that had finally found an outlet. There was no concern for the mother's condition, no joy at the arrival of a child. Only blame. "You thought this would tie you to our family." The older woman sneered. "You were wrong from the start." Her words drew curious looks from passing staff and visitors. She didn't care. In her mind, this was a reckoning long overdue. She accused the young woman of ruining her son's life, of being an inconvenience, of bringing shame instead of pride. The phrase, abandoned, slipped from her lips like a sentence already passed. "You're running toward the wrong station," she added cruelly, as if life itself were a journey the younger woman had failed. The young mother felt humiliation burn hotter than the pain of childbirth. She wanted to argue, to scream, but exhaustion pinned her in place. Her hands trembled. For a terrifying moment, she believed she really was alone. Then the sound of steady footsteps approached, and everything changed. The man who appeared did not rush or raise his voice. He simply arrived, and with him came a calm that felt almost unreal. He listened for a few seconds, his eyes moving from the shaking young woman to the furious older one. When he spoke, it was measured and controlled, but it carried authority. He reminded the mother-in-law that cruelty dressed as righteousness was still cruelty. He spoke of decency, of compassion, of how power should never be exercised over someone at their most vulnerable. Each word stripped away her confidence. By the time he finished, the corridor was silent. The mother-in-law stared at him, stunned, unable to summon another insult. The young woman, guided gently back toward her room, finally let herself cry, not from despair, but from relief. That same day, far from the antiseptic smell of the hospital, another confrontation was brewing under studio lights. The Good Morning America set gleamed with polished floors and warm smiles designed for viewers at home. Sylvester Stallone sat opposite Michael Strahan, the atmosphere initially relaxed. Jokes landed, memories were shared, and the conversation flowed easily enough. But live television has a way of exposing fault lines. A question meant to provoke interest instead struck a nerve. Strahan pressed Stallone about his legacy, hinting that his iconic status owed as much to timing and luck as to relentless effort. Stallone's eyes narrowed just slightly. He had spent a lifetime being underestimated, dismissed, and told he didn't belong. The years hadn't dulled that sensitivity. "I don't believe in luck the way people like to define it," Stallone replied, his voice firm. The studio energy shifted. What followed wasn't a tantrum, but a controlled eruption, a man reclaiming his narrative. He spoke about rejection letters, about being told he was unmarketable, about writing scripts no one wanted until they suddenly did. The tension crackled. Strahan attempted to smooth things over, but Stallone continued, his words driven by something deeper than the moment. For viewers, it was uncomfortable and riveting all at once. This wasn't a movie role. This was a real person bristling at the idea that his struggle could be reduced to chance. For a heartbeat, it seemed like the interview might completely unravel. Then Stallone paused, breathed, and leaned back. The heat subsided, but the message lingered. In two very different spaces, a hospital hallway and a television studio, the same pattern emerged. People reach a breaking point when they feel dismissed, erased, or judged unfairly. The mother-in-law had believed she held absolute authority, until someone unexpected challenged her. Stallone had been expected to smile and move on, until he chose instead to push back. Neither moment was about drama for its own sake. Both were about dignity. About the human need to be seen and respected, whether you are a new mother barely able to stand or a world-famous actor still fighting old assumptions. And in both cases, the confrontation revealed more about the aggressor than the target. Control falters when it meets quiet strength, or unfiltered truth. By the end of the day, the maternity ward returned to its gentle rhythm, and the television show moved on to the next segment. But for those who witnessed either moment, something lingered. A reminder that silence is not always weakness, and speaking up, whether softly or forcefully, can shift everything.